All right. An example of a ward being held hostage. This probably isn't the best example, but it also is kind of extreme and it illustrates the solution that I think is worthy of considering. Because I've had a few people reach out and be like, yeah, we're kind of dealing with this and it's really frustrating. On my mission, I served in Mexico. In the first ward that I was in, I had this experience. My companion and I were walking in this neighborhood that we hadn't spent a lot of time in. It was Sunday afternoon, and it's house by house to house to house to house, like houses really close together, both sides. And as we're walking, I hear a song that I recognize so poignantly. I couldn't tell what it was, but I knew it, and I knew it meant a lot to me. And so I froze in the street. I was like, "What is that song? I know that song." And my companion was like, "Yeah, that's just like a Christian hymn." And I was like, "No, that's Come Come Ye Saints." And we both looked at the house and we were like, "Do we know this house?" And we were like, "No." And we're looking through the book, like it's not anywhere. I don't know. And I'd already been there for a few months. I was there for 6 months total. I think this was like 4 months in. And and so we go knock on the door, and this lady answers the door, and you could tell it's a nice, well kept house, and she is in church dress. Remember, it's a Sunday afternoon, and she's playing Come Ye Saints. And we're like, hey, we were passing by and we recognized the song. You know this song? And she was like, yeah, it's my favorite hymn. And we were like, so you know the hymns? And she was like, yeah, of course I do. I'm a member of the church. And we were like, okay, we didn't see you at church on Sunday. I've never seen you at church on Sunday, but I'm pretty sure this is part of the ward boundaries. Do you go to another ward or something? She was like, nope, no, I don't go to the wards. And I was like, oh, can we come in and do like a scripture prayer, get to know you? Like, why, be curious to know why you're not going to church. And she's like, sure, come on in. So we walk in, and the house is way too clean and put together. And there's pictures of temples and Christ and stuff on the walls. And there's a bookshelf with maybe like 50 books on it. And there's scriptures and hymn books and doctrine books from the church. And we were like, okay, so you're a member of the church. Like, why don't you come to church? And she's like, well, I was asked not to come to church anymore. And I was like, oh, um, when did that happen? What's the story with that? She's like, oh, it was a few years ago. And I don't know why really, but I think it's because the bishop is a little bit jealous. He's a little bit mad, because my husband was a stake president. And I think, he just didn't like me being around. And so he asked me not to go to church anymore. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. Sorry to hear that. Did you talk to the stake president or anything? She's like, yeah, I called him and he said it was up to the bishop. And so yeah, I'm not I'm not going anymore. I just hold my own sacrament meetings here at the house. And I was like, oh, good for you. And I said, well, I mean, obviously you're pretty familiar with the church. We'd love to have you be a resource and whatnot in the ward. Would you consider coming back? Would you consider coming back? And she said, yeah, maybe, but I don't think I could come back with that bishop. And I was like, so you'd wait for him to be released? And she's like, yeah, I'd probably have to wait for him to be released. Or I guess if he wrote me a letter of apology, I might consider it. And I was like, okay, okay. So yeah, let me see what I can do. Nice to meet you. Do scripture and prayer with you real quick and a hymn. And we did, and we left. And my companion and I were like, what the heck was that? That was so weird. because there was just such a weird vibe in the house, and she was like just had a weird vibe about her, and and we started, theorizing like maybe she's been excommunicated, maybe she's a part of a fundamentalist group or something, or who knows, because she was obviously well rehearsed in the gospel. And so we met up with Bishop, and we were like, "Hey, Bishop, we met Sister so and so, Sister Perez or whatever." And he was like, "Oh, how'd you meet her?" And we were walking down the street, heard come, you saints," and so we knocked on the door. And he was like, "Oh, how's she doing?" "Oh, she's doing pretty good, I guess." We're like, "So you told her not to come to church?" And he was like, "Yep." And we're like, "Okay, why is that?" And he was like, "Well, she was a problem." And I was like, "Did you talk to stake president?" And he was like, "Oh yeah. Yeah, stake president is fully on board with this." And I was like, "Really? I didn't even know you could do this. I didn't even know this was a thing." So like what happened? Like why why? And he was like, "Well, there's lots of stories I could tell you, but I'll just tell you the last time she came to church. The last time she came to church, we had a problem with our music." Now, the context here is that I was in a very remote spot in Mexico, like the most remote spot in Mexico. And in this whole mission, nobody cares how you do the music as long as there's music. They don't care if you're playing the piano or the organ, you have a recording or whatever. And the person who's leading the music, I mean, sometimes there's not even anybody doing it, but if you are leading the music, they don't care if you have the one, two, three, four down or anything like that. They don't teach you how to do it. They just expect you to get up there and kind of do circles with your hand and keep everybody kind of interested, semi coordinated in what's going on. In this ward, they had someone who was roughly designated to do music, but they often got help. So this one Sunday, they knew that there was a sister that was interested in contributing that way, and so they said, "Hey, sister, why don't you take a turn doing the music?" And she was like, "Okay, great." This sister apparently had been recently baptized, maybe a month before, and so she was new and excited, and so she gets up there to do the music, and she's doing, the normal like circle thing, and this Sister Perez lady, halfway through the first verse, apparently walked up and stopped everything. Stopped her, stopped the music, everything, and said, "You're doing it wrong. Let me show you how to do it." And so she said, "Okay, go like this, and just kind of get like a 5 second ditty." And then they started again, and she started doing we started singing the song. They did, and she said, "No, no, no, you're doing it wrong." So I stop again. It's like, "Hey, you gotta do it like this. Follow me exactly." And the sister tried again and failed. And Sister Perez says, "Okay, that's good. Nice try. Go ahead and sit down. I'll take it from here." And of course, the new member sister is humiliated. She's mortified. She can't believe what just happened. The bishop tried to kind of like, he was a quiet guy, but he tried to like, help the situation. It was not really helpable. It was a disaster. Everybody was cringing, and it was just a horrible situation. So the next Sunday, the bishop had talked to the stake president, and he pulled the sister in and says, "Sister, you're no longer welcome at the ward. So I would really appreciate it if you would stop coming to the ward." And she stopped coming. She called the stake president. The stake president said, "Yeah, no, I know what he's trying to do," and the bishop, is going to do what he thinks is best for the ward. Um, and her husband had been the stake president, but had apparently passed away some time before that. And this bishop that I was serving with was the same bishop that asked her to stop coming. And so I can only imagine what all of the other stories were. I never asked. That new sister never came back to church, and I could tell the ward wanted to pretend like it never happened and that sister didn't exist because she was so hard to be around. But yeah, and I know people who are like that, not as bad, but even I've been like that from time to time, like trying to set things straight and not really knowing how to do it, whatever. Anyway, that is a perfect example of someone who is being enabled in a ward unit specifically, and how everybody kind of tiptoes around, walks on eggshells because they don't want to be confrontational. They're afraid of what the outcomes might be if they try to address the problem. And so the problem escalates to the point of that. And this bishop, kudos to him. He was a very good bishop in my mind because he was willing to do hard things and have hard conversations, which was surprising because he was a very quiet guy. But but it's just kind of crazy to me that we don't think of that as an option. Like I had never considered that as an option. And I don't think it should be considered an option for the vast majority of cases. Most things can be resolved in different ways. But if you had a situation like that, I mean, just go through the thought experiment. If I had someone in my ward that was doing something like that, how would I address it? What would I do? And it's very hard. I'm not pretending like the solution is easy, but I do think it is simple where the conversations can be very straightforward because we're all volunteers. These are not we're not in like some kind of career aspiration situation, and we're all trying to do our best. And so we can have a little bit of patience with each other. That includes the person who is being patient with the person who is we'll say being offensive. That also includes the person who's being offensive. They're expected to be patient with us as we're trying to figure out how to help them, even if they're narcissistic or I don't know, egoistic, whatever it is. And this comes up quite a bit where somebody gets offended by what somebody says or doesn't say or how they look or how they smell or what color they are, where they're from, or how much they know, how much they don't know. Like why for example, why can't you put a train of thought together very concisely? Why is it that when you speak it's all jumbled up and we have a hard time understanding you? Like just stop commenting. Like there's tons of stuff like that that comes up that is super unhelpful, and that people can get help with those things if we follow the spirit and help them overcome those things. So I hope a lot of you are not in this situation, but for those of you that are, I do recommend thinking outside the box, getting very creative. Do not be afraid to offend people lest you offend the spirit. And one of the next things I'm going to talk about is how when we concentrate so hard on avoiding conflict and like all of the little cultural things that we're afraid to address, it really washes out the purpose of church and the purpose of the gospel, which is Christ and the Spirit, following the Spirit. And there are so many times that I can think of when people make a logistical decision in a ward for the purposes of logistics, making things smoother, ending things on time, getting enough people through, like all different, and they do it at the cost of the Spirit. And it's very sad because as soon as you do that, you lose the reason we're there on Sundays. All right, see you.